What is the most important thing to make gains in the gym? Progressive overload. Progressive overload is the key when it comes to gaining muscle and strength. And you've probably already heard the boring story with the guy carrying the ball, and as the ball, or I don't even know if it was a ball or something, but he carried the ball, I think, and as the ball grew, the guy grew as well. And this is some ancient story, and it's about progressive overload. What this means is to continue making gains in the gym, you'll need to do more work over time. You simply cannot expect to get jacked doing the same shit every single time, because if you stepped into the gym the first day and you could only bench the bar, if you bench the bar for years, do you think you will be more muscular? I don't think so. When you go to the gym and lift, you give stimulus to the muscle with breaking them down, then after that, you rebuild the muscle with food. The goal is also to make adaptations so that next time you step into the gym, the same load is going to be easier. That's how you progress. Now, because the same amount of work that you did last time is now easier, you will need to do more work. First though, before I get into it, form is always key, and obviously form is going to be more important than overloading all the time. If your form is shit, it doesn't matter if your bench press goes up every single session. You need to be more careful with progressive overload on exercises where it's harder to tell whether a set or a rep was high quality or not. For example, with a bench press, yeah, I pressed the weight, so it's probably done. I might have lifted up my hips, that is not good, but in general, it's a bit easier to tell if your form and your technique was on point or not. But when you're doing a barbell row, for example, it's much harder. A lot of people, they progress all the time on barbell rows, but the form is really just shit. And they might go from the bar to 100 kilograms, but they just turned it into more of a shrug or upright row kind of movement. So form is more important. If over time it seems as you increase the amount of work you were doing, but your form got shittier, that might even mean that the work didn't actually increase, or maybe it increased but not in the target muscle. But how do we progressively overload? Progressively overload can have many forms. The simplest is going to be load, just adding weight to the bar every single session or week. Another very simple way to progress on your exercises is adding reps. Just add a rep or two every single week. These two are going to be the most important. You can also add sets, but it's a bit different because then you're adding volume and not just intensity. We'll talk about this a bit later, but generally you should increase both the intensity of your workouts and also the volume weeks. You can also progressively overload with shorter rest periods, but generally I don't recommend this unless something limits you in adding more weight or reps. It might be okay though if you're training at home or in a very limited gym and you maxed out the weights and you don't want to do like 60 reps in a set and all that. And the last thing is better form, but usually you can only notice this over months and years. For example, like a year ago, I used to lateral raise 11, 12 kilograms and now I only do 10. This is not because my side delts got shittier and I got weaker. This is more so because my form got a lot better. So don't get disappointed if you're still lifting the same weights as last year if your form got better. Focusing on getting more out of less weight is a good thing. Now, what kind of progression you will use will generally depend on the equipment and the exercise you're going to be doing. With big barbell compound movements where you can use a lot of weight, progressing with weight every week is usually the best option, especially because usually you'll be doing these movements with low reps. So when you're benching, for example, you can add like 5 pounds every single week. The problem with this, however, is it doesn't work on everything. A lot of machines and cables and all that go by 10-pound increments, and honestly, progressing 10 pounds every single session is nearly impossible, unless you're on the juice, of course. So on most machines, cables, and dumbbells, is going to be better to progress with reps and over time progress with weight. If you cannot add weight every week, you should progress with reps. With that said, there are two important progressions when it comes to adding reps. It's double progression and dynamic double progression. Double progression is where you have a rep range, for example 8 to 12, and you use a weight that lets you do all of your sets in that range. When you get to the point where your sets are at the top of the range, you increase the weight and start again. Dynamic double progression is the same thing, but it goes set by set. This means that if I do lateral raises with 20 pounds, for an example, if I get 12 reps with 20 pounds, that means next session I'm going to do 25 or whatever is available next. So on the first set I got 12 with 20 pounds, but on the second only 11 and then 10. The next time I'm going to do this exercise, on the first set I'm going to increase the weight, but on all of the other sets I'm not. This is going to be mostly used on isolation exercises, but you can use it on compounds as well if you want to. One thing that I want to mention is when it comes to adding weight versus reps, it's going to be a bit of a mind game. If you're doing lower reps, it's going to be easier to add weight, and if you're doing higher reps, it's going to be easier to add reps. And if you think about it, this makes perfect sense. If you're benching 5 reps with 100 kilos, if you increase the 5 reps to 6, you're going to lift, instead of 500 kgs, 600 kgs. That sounds like a lot of extra work. But if you increase it to 102.5 kg with 5 reps, it's only going to be 512.5 kilos. That sounds a lot more reasonable of an increase. On the other hand, if I'm doing very high reps, adding another rep isn't going to be that big of a deal, but adding weight, you add that weight to every single rep you're doing. And since you're doing a lot of reps, that's going to suck. Okay, so if I do like 15 reps of lateral raises, which do you think is going to be easier? Adding another rep or adding like 5 pounds or maybe just 2.5, but both are going to be very hard. But adding another rep is going to be easy. Now don't go overboard with progression. Usually 1 rep or 2.5 kgs, which is around 5 pounds, is going to be enough per week per set. If you do much more, eventually your form will probably break down. There's also people who like to microload. So for an example, they will add 2.5 pounds to the bench every week, but the problem is that in most gyms there's no calibrated plates. This means that the plates are going to be very inaccurate, and a 45-pound plate can be off by as much as, I think, like 5 pounds even, but 1-2 pounds is very common actually. So this means that when it comes to microloading, you might think that you're adding weight, but actually you're not. This was about intensity, but I also want to talk about volume. A lot of people keep sets the same, but what I've recently learned by Renaissance periodization is that actually when it comes to hypertrophy training, increases in volume might even be more important when it comes to making gains than increases in intensity. So this is a very overlooked factor because in most people's programs, sets remain the same for the training cycle. The amount of volume you need to do for the most optimal gains is not set in stone, okay? It's going to move up, down, and whatever. This is why you should train from minimum effective volume to maximum recoverable volume every training cycle. Minimum effective volume means that it's the minimum amount of volume you need to be doing to be able to progress. And the maximum recoverable volume is going to be the amount of volume you can still do and recover back to baseline. Every training cycle, you should go from MEV to MRV with slow increases of volume per week. So 1-2 sets per muscle group per week. And then when you hit your MRV, you need to deload. After that, the whole thing starts again. Usually adding sets should be according to what you felt like in the gym and how your recovery was after your training session. If I train chest on Monday and Thursday, and on Monday I smashed my pecs so fucking hard that I was still sore on Thursday into the next training session, obviously I'm not going to add sets next week. I'm not fucking stupid. But if I train on Monday and I need to train again on Thursday, and on Tuesday I got some mild soreness but not much, and then after that I was fine, then I'm going to add a set or maybe even 2. Also, if I felt like absolute shit during the training and it felt like I'm going to die from this exercise, I'm not going to add sets. But if I felt fine, probably I'm going to add a set or 2. Also, if the session was very, very easy, no pump, no tiredness, no nothing, maybe you can add 2 to 3 sets even. Now, if you get very, very sore, you can subtract a set as well. When you got to your MRE, after that you should do a deload, and a deload makes you sensitive to volume again. And therefore, after you deload, you can start training from MEV again, because now you're going to be more sensitive to volume, and that means less volume would do you justice. In an optimal training cycle, you should add both intensity and volume every single week. So this means your reps or weight should keep increasing, as well as your sets per week. One problem that still keeps most lifters from progressing is they don't actually know how intensely they should be training. So fix that with watching this video.